Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and most of them were in tears because they were online and they read the words of so-called Christians. I'm glad the leader died. I'm glad those people died because they're going to hell anyway, because they're a dangerous cult.
Taking the opportunity of a major tragedy in their community to tell them everything you think is wrong with them, that's not civilized behavior. That's not the right thing to do.
On the morning of September 28th, 2025, there was a mass shooting and arson attack that occurred at the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Michigan.
It was a tough day for Latter-day Saints.
It was the scariest I've ever been in my life. It wasn't the shooter trying to shoot me. It was, is my family okay?
This is horrible news, and unfortunately, people are using this tragedy to talk about theology differences between the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and Christians. In fact, the talking point is that Latter-day Saints, or Mormons, aren't Christians. For example, Calvin Robinson on Twitter said, "What happened down the road in Michigan yesterday was awful. No one should be killed in their place of worship. It is abhorrent. But for Mormons to be using this tragedy in an attempt to force Christians to acknowledge them as, quote, one of us, close quote, is sickening." It is disheartening to see that these responses were very frequent. For many, this seems like the opposite of what Christians should be doing when there's a massive and catastrophic tragedy like this one. Christian Tweet says, "No, Mormons are not Christians. Yes, every church should be a safe place to worship." Five Solas on Twitter said, "No, Benny, Mormons are not Christians. Did the shooter intend to attack Christianity? Maybe, but his motive is irrelevant in the discussion as to whether or not Mormons are Christians. They are not, and they never will be unless they repent of a false religion." Someone else said, "Amid the attack on the Mormon church, here's a quick reference for folks wanting to know what Mormons believe. While you read it, ask yourself, is this biblical Christianity?" And of course we have to bring up Pastor Mark Driscoll, who unfortunately just a few weeks ago was saying that Mormonism, that is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, is a demonic cult. After the tragedy of Mormons being shot in their church, he said the murder of innocent people is evil, no matter if they're Jewish, Muslim, Mormon, or Christian. And someone responded, even if they're in a demonic cult, pointing out the difficult needle that Pastor Mark Driscoll is trying to thread when he says that Mormons are both a satanic cult and innocent. In fact, Glenn Beck, the radio commentator, made some posts about the tragedy in Michigan, and unfortunately, he had to give some follow-ups based on some of the comments he was receiving. He said, "After reading a few of the comments to my original post, I felt compelled to ask my Christian friends a few questions. If in this moment of grief, someone had said to me, as I mourn the loss of Charlie Kirk, yes, but everything he said was trash, how do you think that would feel? Does that sound like the way we honor the charge to mourn with those who mourn?"
And when I read that, I wept with the same kind of pain that I had on the death of Charlie Kirk when the non-Christians celebrated his death. I'm glad he's dead. And I wondered, what is the difference between these Christians and the non-Christians with Charlie?
Glenn Beck on his radio program the day after the shooting took place had a few words for Christians.
Biblically, the commandment is clear. Love thy neighbor. I'll go a step further. Love thy enemy. This is what it means. You can't link arms with people who feed the poor and clothe the naked and rescue the captive and defend the family because you differ on doctrine. If that is the hill you choose to die on, I will not remain on that hill with you.
I know not every single Christian is taking this opportunity, this tragedy, to dunk on members of the church, to dunk on Mormons. In fact, one great example of someone who is trying to defend the church is actually Michael Knowles of the Daily Wire. Michael Knowles on his Michael Knowles show came out with the following statement. Take a look.
One response that I find unfortunate is that some people have decided to respond to this attack by pointing out all of the things that they consider erroneous in the Mormon religion. Slow your roll a little bit is what I would say. Obviously, you can disagree with LDS, but that should not be your first response. If that is your first reaction, cool your jets. It's unseemly. That's not what one does when one is grieving, when there is a tragedy taking place, especially involving one's countrymen.
Michael Knowles is a devout Catholic, and I appreciate Christians like him trying their best to mourn with those who mourn and trying to shut down these ridiculous talks about whether or not Mormons are Christians at a time like this.
Even if your purpose is to evangelize, convert these people, taking the opportunity of a major tragedy in their community to tell them everything you think is wrong with them, it's also probably just not going to work. That's not civilized behavior. That's not the right thing to do.
We might have differences of religion. We might have differences in what we believe about the nature of Jesus Christ, but we are all God's children, and we all deserve love and comfort.
Yeah, but you're really not a Christian. I don't really care what you think. I really don't. I don't. I care what you say about people who are far better than me in my faith.
Many members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints have varying opinions about the label Christian. For me, I want to be a Christian, not because I care about what others think about me, but because I believe in Jesus Christ. And I think the word Christian summarizes that is what I believe. In fact, you're going to have to check out this next video that includes some interesting quotes from President Gordon B. Hinckley, the prophet of the church in the late 90s and early 2000s. You want to check out that video because I also talked to evangelicals discussing the idea of Mormons as Christians. Check it out and I'll see you over there.